destined to talk about the evolution of my work. I'm originally from Columbus, Ohio, born and raised. I went to Ohio State, got a BFA in painting, and afterwards, I honestly didn't have the confidence to be an artist, and so I got a master's in education and taught for 4 years at the Graham School. I think that working with those kids really gave me a lot of confidence to go out and kind of reapproach what I always wanted to do, which was to be an artist. So in 2010, I left and went to Savannah, Georgia, and went to graduate school at the Savannah College of Art and Design, also in painting. I love painting, always wanted to be a painter ever since I was a child, but really struggled in graduate school. They have a habit of really beating you up in grad school. So I was having a rough time. I ended up going to France in the summer of 2011, and that's where my whole world was changed. Originally, when I went to school, my plan was to continue teaching. I wanted to teach at the college level, but then I met this artist. I had the opportunity to work with Teresita Fernandez, who is an installation artist, and she did a studio visit with me. She said, "You're not a painter, you're a sculptor." She said, "You're working much too small." I was building these 5x7 panels at the time. She said, "This is way too small, you need to go much bigger." And I also, at that time, asked her for an internship. She is based out of Brooklyn, New York, and she said yes. So she left, and I felt like I had to do something to impress her, to remind her that she said yes to me for this internship. So I went out and I found this giant pile of white pumice in the middle of nowhere, France, and started wrapping the rocks with sewing thread. It was like the only solution that I could figure out at the time to make a large piece of work. I had very little cash to make work with, and there wasn't a lot of. I couldn't find any thread. I was in Provence, middle of nowhere, France. So my family started sending me, and my friends sent me all this thread. It just happened to be, all these different colors, and it became this gradation. And I was really happy with the way it worked. I'd never worked in that way before, and it became this very physical process, and it was very site-specific. I was responding to the space and my surroundings, and I really loved the way that happened. So when I returned to Savannah from France, I started to consider ways in which to continue that dynamic, and I realized that I was just really physically drawn to space, and in some cases the absence of space. So I started using twine to articulate spaces. That evolved when I ended up leaving for my internship. I ended up going to Brooklyn to work with Teresita in the spring of 2012. And while there was, I think, just really influenced by New York City, Chelsea, what was going on in the galleries. And I really started thinking about, what I was doing with the twine. The twine became this another drawing medium. So I started incorporating light, a lot of, in this piece in particular, when the light hits it in different ways, you get a second drawing on the wall. And that was something that I was really intrigued by. And then I've also been always inspired by light artists, like James Turrell is one of my art heroes. So my first major piece was my thesis exhibition, and that was in Savannah, where I installed in a little house that was in the middle of the ghetto. It was this old candy shop. It was about 100 years old, and I installed all these these string pieces that were then illuminated by black light, and it became this neon, futuristic, weird kind of thing in this little house. It was kind of otherworldly, kind of space age. I don't know. It just really had this ephemeral quality that I really enjoyed. And it wasn't, SCAD didn't respond to it very well. Nobody really liked the work. I had some people, and I remember leaving. I left SCAD and went back to New York and was kind of lost. I was like, what do I do now? And the piece ended up getting published, and it got published several times, and it gave me the courage, I think, to continue working in that way. So finished school, and then I was in Brooklyn trying to figure out what's next. Teresita became a mentor to me in a lot of ways. I think one of the things about being an artist is like nobody tells you how to be an artist. They're like, you know, good luck. You finish school, go make some art. But she's become this very successful installation artist. She's on the U.S. Fine Arts Commission, appointed by President Obama. She's done some very successful pieces. And so I asked her, I said, what did you do after graduate school? Like, what was your next steps? And she said, I spent 2 years in residency. And so I was like, okay, well, here's this artist who's been very successful, so I should do what she's doing. So I started looking into residencies, which is great. At this point, I've spent about 5 months in residency and have had some really amazing experiences. But the struggle has become this, like, how do you support yourself? You know, I'm not independently wealthy, so it's been a challenge. So as I was gearing up for getting ready to go to these residencies, my first one was in upstate New York. I was trying to figure out like what that looked like, what that life looked like. I was trying to maintain my studio. I had a studio in Bushwick. My goal was that I was going to like live in the studio illegally, like in between residencies. I was catering, waiting tables and stuff, and all that fell through. And so I just kind of I got rid of everything and just kind of left. I left New York and went upstate for 4 months and had a really amazing experience. In that time, I did about 2 major installations in that time, and then had the opportunity to go to the Vermont Studio Center in November. And by the time I got to Vermont, I was pretty burnt out, and I was kind of trying to figure out what was next, what was the next thing. So I'm in that next step there. During that residency period, I really started thinking about what I was doing, what was my job as an artist, how to navigate being an artist. And I really wanted to start looking back into painting and drawing and creating objects, specifically to hang on the wall. So it's this like conversation of like translating the 3-dimensional work into the 2 dimensions, and going back and forth, and the dichotomy between those two thoughts. Really thinking about how to incorporate those special elements. The way I kind of solved that problem for myself was to kind of create this work that is all based off of the parabolic curve. I'm really attracted to this shape, which is, it's created with straight lines, but it has all these beautiful curves, and then the way little subtle things happen using these straight lines. So I just really started kind of obsessively using that shape over and over and over again. And then it also became about my life as it's become. I've become this nomad. I don't really have an address right now. I have several. And so it's been, trying to figure out how to make work without space. You really, in order to be an oil painter, you need to have an easel, and you need paint and stuff. You need stuff, and I don't have a lot of money right now, so I can't carry my stuff everywhere. So that's where I started embroidering these canvases. So the canvases have traveled with me. So I've been able to continue working while also traveling. Same with the string. The string is something that it's very compact. So you can take this thing and build a big thing out of something really small. So that's kind of that's where I am right now. I think that in particular I'm interested in articulating spaces overall. So. Any questions?
I have a question.
I'm going to try to formulate it as a question.
Okay, cool.
So I think it's interesting in this series of paintings that you're taking the same shape and then presenting it in different formats. So I see more of foliage, some sort of wooded area with the same shape. I see almost elements of still life as well. And then I see kind of elements of early modernism as well, just treating it as a shape. So can you talk a little bit about how you approach one of these paintings?
Well, it was really interesting. So I got into my first residency and I moved up there, and I was like, okay, I'm gonna make paintings again. I was really ready to start making these objects, and I was immediately highly criticized. They were like, why are you painting? Why are you making these objects? Like, you do installation work. And I was very defensive, mostly because of probably my experience in grad school. But I felt that with these objects, like, it was just through the process of making, you know, like, sometimes like just the physical act of making something, I think, helps you get into that space where you're like trying to, you know, figure out what it is that you're articulating. And that's something that I think that with an artist's work, you know, overall, it's your life's work. You're trying to communicate this thing that you have in your mind and make it physical, make it tangible to others. And it's like this, you know, I can't really necessarily articulate why I'm so interested in space, and specifically negative space, and or, you know, in relation to like the way different spaces mean different things to different people. Or in the case of these works, it's like, you know, they change based on your experience as a person. Like, everybody sees different things in them, and that's something that I really love about that. I mean, I feel like one of my jobs as an artist is to simply point to something and, like, you know, try to get someone to look at it and pay attention to it and have an experience, but also being careful in that I'm not trying to push my ideas on them. I simply want them to also have an experience, if that makes sense.
Could you talk about like your site-specific installations? And when I first saw your website, I was like, those are awesome, you know.
Thanks.
And there's like a lot of like light and stuff involved in that too.
Mm-hmm. What specifically are you interested in? Is there a particular piece that you're thinking about?
Well, I mean, I guess I can get more specific. Like, how do you choose your sites, and how do you choose I guess, how you operate within the space, and I guess what it finally looks like, you know, is that preconceived, or is it related to the site, you know, specifically, or things like that?
Yeah, I mean, it's all those things. I mean, I'm getting ready to do a piece. I'm currently living in Atlanta, Georgia right now, which is really interesting, being like, you know, a Yankee in the South. I mean, they love to remind me that I'm a Yankee. And my parents, like, you know, I'm living with my parents in between residencies. I'm getting ready to go to Italy in April, so I'm trying to, like, you know, save some money and get ready to go. And so they've graciously taken me in, and they're living near Kennesaw Mountain, which is a historic place where, like, the Northerners, the armies, you know, the Union Army came to burn Atlanta, and that was like kind of the last stand. And there's all these Confederate trenches everywhere, and there's all these hills, and so I just recently discovered this space, and you can see the way that the trenches kind of like interweave, and like, so I'm getting ready to do something like a cross, or I'm not sure exactly yet, but that space like just totally really spoke to me. I mean, there's like something really interesting that's still there, that you know, people from Georgia identify so highly with being Confederate. You know, like, it's just really interesting. And so it's like, it's also speaking to like my experience as an outsider, and trying to, you know, figure out this culture. You know, why are they so intrigued about me being a Yankee? Like, why is that such a huge deal? I don't know. So I let the space speak to me. Like, the piece in New York that I did was on the side of a barn, and it evolved out of conversations with the people who lived in the area. Wassaic is historically a place where a lot of poor people live, and a lot of home foreclosures have happened. And, you know, the residency that has been created there has benefited in a lot of ways from these home foreclosures, because they could buy these houses for cheap and then put residents in it. But at the same time, like, they're trying to give back. So it was like this. I titled the piece "Support and Seizure" because it was like, you know, the structures, they're like supporting the barn, and they're definitely a part of the barn, and it's just like this interesting dichotomy about how, you know, there's like good and bad, negative and positive things happening.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Yeah.
I've never been in them, you know, honestly, but when they're finally up and installed, like, is the space still able to be traversed, or is it?
Yes.
Do you somehow like debilitate the space from functioning, or?
It depends. It depends on how it's installed. Like this Savannah piece, that was you could walk into the house and then walk around the structures, be surrounded by the string. It becomes very immersive. I'm getting ready to do a piece in Atlanta in May, so I'm in the process of working with someone to build an armature structure for people to kind of climb up into. So getting a little more aggressive with like how to manipulate the space. I think that that's something that's really interesting and important, and that's something that painting for me has in some ways really failed. It just is this thing that hangs on the wall, whereas an installation is a kinetic, it's an experience. Everybody's experience is different, and it's. One of the cool things about them too is like seeing how other people, it's like I get really excited about the space and what happens when it's activated, but then seeing how other people experience it is really amazing also. Yeah?
Why are you a string person now?
Am I a string person?
It sounded like your original idea was that you didn't have any money and you had strings and rocks, right? I mean, did you fall in love with that as a medium, or is that just are you continuing to refine that idea, or?
Yeah, I consider them to be three-dimensional drawings, so I feel like it's a way in which to draw within the negative space. Yeah. So yeah, I would say that. I'm string person. That's always kind of concerned me a little. It's hard. It's something that's hard to navigate as an artist. Is becoming identified with this particular medium. I've always hoped to be like Gerhard Richter. He's done whatever he wants, whenever he wants. And that's kind of with why I decided to go back to painting again too. I don't want to be limited by a medium, but currently I'm in love with string. The embroidery in these pieces was a way to directly involve the string into the compositions. So, yeah.
So, obviously you love string because you're moving around a lot. You're kind of, like you said, you're a nomad. And then, would it be different? How would you be doing your art different if you were in one place? Say you had your own space. How would you be different? Would you use different materials, like more materials that were not as portable, or what would you think?
I'm sure. I think that obviously, I think that your experience as a person is going to directly influence your work. I don't think that I would be working the way I am. And the moving around has become a very huge part of my experience as an individual and experience as an artist. Just these trenches that I've come across, I would never, that's something that I wasn't seeking out. I wasn't seeking out that space or that conversation, but it found me. And I think that that's a lot of what ends up happening is these spaces find me, and I'm just trying to I'm the vehicle that these, the situation is kind of communicating through, I suppose. Yeah. So in some ways I'm a little nervous.
You're in the string phase.
Yes. Well, yes. And in some ways I'm concerned about, staying still for too long because I feel like it might root me or something might happen. I don't know. But the moving around right now is really I'm going to be going to Italy, and then I'm coming back to Atlanta, and then I'll be in upstate New York, and then I'll be in Ohio, and back in upstate New York, and I'm bouncing all over these places right now. So, and that's, I don't know, it's these constant new people, constant new experiences, new places, new, I don't know, it's good. Yeah.
Could you talk about color in your work? I'm noticing that there's some monochromatic interest maybe, and there's slight interruptions every now and again, and you get the fluorescent stuff on the more sculptural stuff. What do you think about in terms of color, or how do you decide colors, or what's your relationship with color?
These, I wanted them to be really spatial explorations. So I felt that the introduction of color would be very would complicate things. And I felt that the best way to introduce that color would to be with the string, the thread itself. And I like those little subtleties. I feel like a successful painting to me is something that really has a lot of multi-dimensional features to it. So like the constant, you know, weaving in and out of, you don't know what's on top, you don't know what's underneath. It keeps like evolving. So I think that color would really complicate those things. Yeah, and then there's other like, I'm really attracted to this like glow in the dark thing. Like maybe that's the kid in me, but like the paintings, some of the paintings and the prints, some of them have glow in the dark elements. And I think that that's like, it's like a whole nother thing. It's like this little extra surprise, you know, when you discover that there's this whole other life to it, I suppose, after the lights go out.
Well, thank you very much, Megan.